What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast. As always, I am your host, Etchy, and joining me are three of the greatest young minds the Pokemon TCG has to offer. First up, we got Benny Billinger. Benny, we haven't had you on since before LAIC, so first of all, congratulations on your first big Masters finish. You got a nice top 32. How'd that feel?
Getting my first Masters finish felt really good, especially at IC. Walked out of there with 3K. I ended up getting the stipend for the quarter as well, which is really sweet. It felt great.
Awesome. Next up, we have the star of our world's video, Michael Davidson. Michael, how you doing?
Doing good. Excited for Toronto for sure.
Yeah. Everyone here, everyone in the call, including me this time, will be going to Toronto, so we have a lot to talk about with that. Lastly, we're joined by the man with no social media, Hunter Butler. Hunter, how's it going? Have you been cooking?
I've been cooking. Unfortunately, I'm not young or new, so I'm the one old grandpa. So
You are one of the greatest minds, though, so that's fine.
I'm disgruntled, but I'm ready to play this tournament for sure.
Awesome. Lots to talk about. A bunch of events have taken place. But before we get into that, I just want to mention briefly, if you haven't already seen it on our YouTube channel, we put up part one of the Worlds video that I recorded and have been working on a bunch over the last couple months on and off. And we got part one out that goes through the Chicago boot camp that everyone in that group went through, and then some stuff before Worlds, and then day one of Worlds. And then after Toronto, probably next Friday, I would say, is when part two will go up. So that'll cover Michael's awesome day two run, going into top cut of Worlds. And there's a lot of cool behind the scenes footage we got for that. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely do. Appreciate the support on the video. Would love to do stuff like that again in the future. So thank you for checking it out. And if you haven't already, be sure to check it out. So yeah, lots of events taking place. Most notably, we had Stuttgart, the biggest one recently. But we also had Perth and Bogota. And across all three, there's just like 20 to it's like almost 20 decks that we could probably talk about in the podcast. We don't have like that much time. What we'll probably do is like for the bonus episode, we'll break it out into a couple. We'll talk about some other niche deck stuff in the bonus episode because there's no way we'll have time to go through every deck right now. This is such a wide and diverse meta. It's kind of hard to figure out where to even start. I just know we normally talk about Zard and Drago every episode, so let's not start with those. I guess we could start with Gardevoir since it won Perth. Michael, you are a big Gardevoir believer because you played it to like a lot of local tournaments here, and then you just never actually play it to the big tournaments. But how are you feeling about Gardevoir right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are seeing that Gardevoir is actually pretty well placed in the meta. Like you said, I think the deck. I mean, it's especially good in best of one, which is why I like mainly play it for locals when I play it, and I haven't been like as confident as it for majors. Although I think I maybe should have played it to LAIC. Benny had a great run there, and obviously so did Henry Chow. For majors, sometimes the time constraints can be a bit of an issue, which has like always been one of Guardy's flaws. And then at least like last year, I did play it to like 6 majors in a row last year.
Yeah.
To somewhat average finishes. So I'm a little bit like traumatized from that to bring it back to a major. But I think the way the meta has been shaping up, Guardy is a pretty solid play for the most part.
Yeah, kind of bouncing off of that, I wanted to ask Benny because you obviously LASC was previous format. The Turbo build, Henry Chow's build, had a lot of success in that format. Helped you keep up with Drago, and we've kind of been seeing the slower build of Guardy kind of come back now too. Why is that happening?
So I think the reason that you're seeing Slow Guardy come back a bit is because Terapagos is like not really a thing anymore. And like the problem with the Terapagos match is if you went like Evo and a double Curlia, they can just go pop Dusknoir and Prime Catcher, and then you're behind in the game, and then you're also behind in the prize trade, which like both factors like makes the matchup like pretty much unwinnable. But now that Terapagos isn't a thing, you see like a lot more of the slow Guardy builds. And like they're all playing Manaphy to deal with like Drago's Kyurem. So I think like last format the Turbo Guardy build was definitely better. But going into Toronto, I think the slow Guardy would probably be a bit better.
If you're a slow Guardy, do you still include Candy, or do you just omit Candy altogether?
I don't think you're supposed to play Candy. Like I've done a little bit of testing with the deck, and like I've just found that if you have to use a Candy, like you're not really like winning the game anyways, because then your like draw support is like really disrupted. And without Fez, and then I think Kato's list, I'm pretty sure didn't run Ninja either. So like without like any Curlias or like ways to draw, you can't really afford to have that Guardy, like just that lone Guardy without the support.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Benny on that. The candy can be nice. Like it gives you a few lines, especially if you like whiff early evos. But you don't have Fez in your deck. You don't have Secret Box. It's so much more difficult than Henry's deck to actually like make a candy play and have like a powerful turn. Like a lot of time, if you have to just like Arven for candy, you're not hitting the other pieces that you need. So I think overall, candy is probably not worth it. But it's not going to be like a bad inclusion necessarily. I just think there are probably better cards to play than it.
Yeah, if you're playing Unfair Stamp over Secret Box, I also don't like see like a majorly huge reason to include candy. Just same thing. Like if you have candy, it doesn't make it. It's not a bad card. You can obviously get usage out of it. It's just that your turns are going to probably be a lot weaker. I think another thing too that was a difference between like how Henry was playing the deck and at the time how Drago was being played. Because when Henry created the deck, Worlds and After Worlds, Halucha was still in some of Drago lists where you could do like the double kill with Dragapult. Now that actually just doesn't no list play Halucha anymore, so you don't lose multiple Rolts and or Pokemon in one turn, which is pretty nice. I think kind of the biggest thing for me that if I allure to Gardevoir is just how strong Klefki is. So Klefki is just really strong at some of these newer niche decks like Klawf, where you can just kind of turn off their whole engine. And obviously, with Lost Box becoming more of an established deck at 5-6%, whereas before it wasn't like that, gives other uses for the Klefki as well to be able to get value against Lost Box decks too. So I think Gardevoir is a solid deck. I haven't put enough testing into both slow or fast versions. I've worked on the Henry build and just kind of left it how it is and have played with that. I haven't gone back to slow Guardy, but I can see merit for both. I don't see like an issue with playing either or. I do think that not playing Manaphy is just psycho. So you should just whatever you're doing, just play Manaphy. I think whether you're playing fast Guardy or slow Guardy, you can't combat Regidrago and Lost Box without it. I think it's just
I think that's a good point, at least with Lost Box, because that was kind of a matchup that with Fast Guardy, Henry was basically just like taking the loss to it, which was definitely better in the prior format because without Pikachu, Lost Box was like way less popular. But I think like in the current format, that's like a kind of a bigger shout for slow Guardy because you have Manaphy. Most lists play the Flutter Mane, and then obviously you have the Klefki in the early game. So you have like a lot of opportunity to slow them down. And with Flutter Mane and Manaphy, like you can put them in a really annoying position. And they don't really play bundle anymore, so it's really hard for them to get around Flutter Mane too. So I think the Lost Box matchup is significantly improved for slow Guardy, which is like not a super relevant matchup, but it's definitely not a decently played deck. So that's a good matchup that was pretty bad for Fast Guardy.
So I guess one of the things that may lure people away from Guardy is the skill ceiling for the deck. Like it is not an easy deck to play, and like just get it out there. Like at LAIC, I found myself like I misplayed a few times. They weren't like game losing misplays, but I definitely could have played better in some matchups there. So I feel like that's one of the things that could deter people away from it, and that's probably also why you don't see it as high right now.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the seconding to Michael or what Michael said about Lost Box not playing bundle, and there's a lot of lists too that are just cutting down on Pokestops. They're not playing 4 Pokestop. They're playing 3 and 2, and some are playing stupid Mountain. Please don't play the Mountain. It doesn't do like you're just losing consistency to dealing with stuff like Flutterman and Klefki, where if you have a bundle or you don't have a bundle, if you have 4 Pokestop and you can attach to Iron Hands, I think the matchup's still salvageable enough where you can play it. So yeah, I definitely think there are a lot of things fighting in Gardevoir's favor besides the time thing, which I guess now that ties mean something, maybe it's a little bit better.
So, there you go. Yep.
There's my 2 cents on 521, which I will not be going for.
Were you on that episode when we talked about the tournament changes? I don't remember, but
I don't know, but I don't. I feel like opinions are just lost cause at this point. It just feels like Pokemon is just having like a menopause moment where they're like, one day I'm hot, one day I'm cold, one day I want this, one day I don't. So I feel like whatever they got going on over there, they just need to get their meds in order so they can make a decision. I don't know. It just seems bad.
gotcha. So, completely unrelated to that, I want to talk about Klawf Terapagos because when was this? This was it Stuttgart?
Sacramento was the
Sacramento.
one
Yeah,
there. The list kind of got there, and then Stuttgart was when all of the really, really high level players picked it up.
right. Yeah. So after Sacramento regionals, Hunter texted me just the raw list for that got like 26 at Sac and was like, take a look at the cloth. I am the goat and the prophet. Can you explain? Can you do you actually you want to start with talking about general cloth stuff?
Yeah, sure. What's pretty cool to this is that I worked on this deck like 2 months ago, so I was already trying to work out Klawf's problem, which was damage ceiling, and also it needed a partner. It needed something else to attack with, where where the it needed to survive. You needed to be able to survive an attack. So I sent Etchy a list of a Terapagos knocked owl Klawf
Right.
deck,
Yeah. Yeah.
and basically that got messed around with and then just died in my testing. Then came Sacramento, and I saw the deck, and I was like, wow, okay, it's kind of just like a simplified version of what I was trying to get at. And then the following week, before I could even take any time to mess around with it, it was already like a thing.
Yeah.
So I've spent some time testing the deck. It's definitely in my considerations for playing to the tournament for three major reasons. The first reason is that this deck can take donks, which no other deck in this format or for the past couple of years can do. That is a set of power that should not be looked past. That is a very ridiculous win con that no other deck can do. So that's ridiculous in itself. The second thing, and probably the most important thing, the strength of this deck is that it's the only deck that turns off Fez. And what I mean by that is that you can pretty much manipulate any Pokemon to die in between turns so that they don't get Fez, and or get a Pokemon, something like Charizard or Dragapult, to die coming into your turn and then take another knockout. So basically a 4-prize turn.
Right.
So this deck manipulates prizes and manipulates the format in a way where a lot of people's draw engines that only consist of Mew plus Fez, Fish plus Fez, Ninja plus Fez, they just lose half their draw engine. And then the third reason is it's obviously a non-EX based deck, and if for those who are been living under a rock, decks like Miraidon, Raging Bolt, Roaring Moon, Terapagos, all these 2-prize based decks that have all these weak 2-prize liability Pokemon on the board, Klawf just kind of takes advantage of that. So I really like the deck. It is a pile. It definitely has some consistency issues. However, the power level is so high that I think it's worth the consistency issues, especially if someone like a world champion Robin Schultz is playing this to a tournament, then it can't be not good. I just don't see anyone who is like, oh, Klawf's a myth and oh, it's just a fun deck, whatever, has not played against someone competent with the deck, because it is a very powerful deck. Big fan of the Klawf.
One thing that I wanted to say, like, I do think that like Klawf being able to like take a donk like going first is like a little bit scary, but I feel like realistically the deck doesn't actually hit the turn one like Petront. The Petront what Brute Bonnet
Booster.
Sneasel.
Yeah.
I don't think it actually hits it like that often. Although if you can like Sealstone for the trolley turn one, or if you like raw draw the trolley, your odds have to go like way up. But I don't think you actually like hit it that often, which is like not something to play into. But like I'm always like a little bit like surprised if they can actually hit it, because it's like so many pieces. I guess they don't need the area zero, but if they want to like build their board so that if they whiff, they can still actually win. They kind of it's like difficult, and I think it's like kind of low odds to actually hit going first, but
I think it does depend on your. Robin's list only played one Petrant, whereas the other people's list plays two, so it's a little more viable with the second Petrant. You also don't even part of the donk stuff is the how many Guru do you play? Do you play Carmine or not? So it does depend how many cards you can dig through, because potentially you could Squawk plus Carmine. I mean, you only need a couple of nest balls and one of the tools. I mean, it really, depending on how your list is built, because it doesn't have to be as techy as they have it right now. Like, I'll be honest, I think a lot of like 3 Mochi seems like too much. I think 2 is fine. There are a lot of counts in the deck that can be slimmed down for other stuff, and it'll be interesting to see how other people innovate their list, or if they're just gonna copy and paste play what Robin or play what Nico and them played yesterday as well. So it'll be interesting, but I do think there's room for innovation in the deck, 100%.
What do you think about like the Genesect?
I am not a fan of the Genesect, only because I'm personally only playing 1 Forest Sealstone. No deck besides Lost Zone has ever played 2 Forest Sealstone. I don't know why that rule is changing for this deck. You're prizing at 1 in 11 games. I'm not worried about that in a long tournament. So I'm having other space. But if I had extra tools, and like I mentioned too, I'm down on the Mochi, so I'm less tools. So I don't have the extra tool to use the Genesect. However, I do have the Regidrago to draw cards, which I prefer having that in my deck over the Genesect. But I can see the merit of not getting unfair stamped, because it sucks getting unfair stamped. But that's why I have Drago, so I'll draw some cards instead.
Yeah, like one of the cool things about like the Klawf deck that I've noticed is that like you really have like answers to everything almost. Against Drago, I mean, like the matchup's like pretty straightforward. You just go like turn 2, bomb their guy. Against Zard, you have the Electrode and the Goggles, which is able to one-shot a Zard. And then against like stall decks, you have Petra and EX, which is able to switch your Pokemon in and out. So I definitely do think that this deck is pretty good. It has like a lot of answers to everything. But yeah, like one of the big issues is the consistency, at least from what I found.
The last thing I'll say about the deck too is that I don't play Briar. I think Briar is an absolute waste of space. You're never pulling that off. You're never finding it. You need to be playing 4 Arven. Anybody else like running around with this deck with 3 Arven and not playing a 4th Arven makes absolutely no sense. Cut your Briar for 4th Arven. You will not miss it, I promise.
All right, sound advice from the Klawf prophet himself. Going from a real deck then to a deck that Benny says is very much not real, Pult Thorns, which has consistently top cut like all these events recently. Why do you not like it?
Dude, like I just don't think like the Pokemon go together. You have to play 3 different types of energies. Like I understand the meaning behind it. Like Dragapult is obviously like very slow, and it's like it takes a ton of turns to pull off. And then obviously you have that Iron Thorns to slow your opponent down. But like just the concept of the deck, man. Like you lose to like a single Cologne and Zard. I don't think your Drago matchup is that good. I don't think your Klawf matchup is that good. Like I do think the inclusion of Toedscruel makes it a lot better. I think the like from what I've tested, the Toedscruel definitely makes a huge difference. But dude, this deck does not feel real at all.
I will agree that I think that the pairing of them is not that synergistic. However, it makes sense that Iron Thorns kind of slows. Dragapult's biggest problem was always Raging Bolt. He just get ran over. So Thorns is effectively slowing down Raging Bolt, which is nice. And you're also slowing down Regidrago, which is nice to try to get up your Dragapult. However, as a person who has tried every build of Dragapult and have given it probably way too much credit ever, I am not a fan of the build. I'm not testing it. I wouldn't endorse it. I do think it's soft lock decks like this, just a setup in the history of Pokemon, just don't work very well. Like where you're going from a soft lock to like going to a different attacker. There's not a lot of decks in the Pokemon history that do that. It's either like you're a hard lock deck or you're a spread deck or a damaging deck. the decks that are tempo-y between a soft lock and damage there's not many of them. So the synergy just isn't there for me. And I think Crispin is a freaking horrible supporter to have to play for turn. But hey, Mads Jensen, good Pokemon player. He is a good Pokemon player, so I'll give him that. He is a solid player.
Yeah, I initially I kind of thought the deck was like a meme, but I think it's actually like somewhat respectable. I think it has a pretty good Zard matchup. And I think like it's probably the best way to play Dragapult because I think you kind of need the time that it gives you. Because otherwise I think Dragapult is just like too slow for the most part. The other thing that like I think the energy split is actually like kind of irrelevant, like because Vessel can search 2 different types, Crispin searches different types, like it ends up not mattering that much. Maybe there are a few situations like where you have like the wrong energy, but I think for the most part that can kind of compensate for fitting all 3 different types, and it like doesn't actually end up hurting you that much. I don't think like the deck's matches are like that good though, and like I think you lose so much of the Thorns value because like in order to win most games you have to bench the Dragapult and sometimes the Toedscruel, so like it's so easy for your opponent to play around to the point where I'm not sure the deck is like worth playing. But
I think if anything, this should just speak to the strength that Quad Thorns is still just a solid deck that people are not playing.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to play something like this, you should just be playing Quad Thorns because it's a better deck and it's a harder lock. I don't like. It makes sense that Iron Thorns is helping the Dragapult, but I don't exactly know what Dragapult it like does for like the matchups where you're just an Iron Thorns deck. Then you just have 10 dead cards in your deck. So I don't.
Sure. Yeah, we did see 2 Iron Thorn players from Japan do very well at Perth, so it definitely seems like it's very valid in the meta as well. I guess we can move on then to Gholdengo, which is another deck that is we talked about it a little bit last time, but it's just kind of gotten more and more legs. It's just kind of perennially been around, varying results here and there. I think we had 2 in top 8 at Stuttgart, and then I don't think there was really any at Perth. And then what about Pagoda? Not too much at Pagoda either, but Stuttgart showed up pretty strong there. Hunter, are you a fan of the Gholdengo?
I am a fan of Gholdengo. Gholdengo's cool. I think the Togekiss is broken. However, I would not be playing like a 2-0-2 line type of deal. If anything, I'd be playing if I wanted a second Togekiss, maybe I would play a 1-0-2 or something like that. But I'm not a fan of the Boule type of build. I'm more interested in including the Palkia, the Ninja, and then also if you want to have Togekiss, you can have it. I think just the Energy Search Pro is so strong for the deck.
Yeah.
Because that was like the biggest problem is getting your first knockout and then like having superiors to go through the game. You know, you would have to like discard a bunch of energy, then play a superior plus have energy, and then you only have a couple superiors for your other knockouts. Now you can just play Energy Search Pro, do whatever knockout you need to do, and then have the retrievals and superior retrievals to end the game or stretchers or whatever. Yeah, Togekiss is broken. If you flip heads, you're definitely enjoying your time. Yeah, I think the deck's strong and doesn't hurt to be able to, like Terapagos, be able to create a 1 prize board and then force a 7 prize game, and then also have Togekiss on top of it, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a whole 1 prize board, and then they take 1 prize, and then I take a single prize, but I flip the heads on Togekiss. Now it's 2 for 1 or even 1 for 3. It just starts to get really ridiculous on the trade. So I think that's really strong. And it's got a solid draw engine. Fez and Ninja and Gholdengo put together draws you a lot of cards. So I think it's sound, consistent. I don't think there's a lot of reasons not to play. And you are, well, no, the math is okay against getting attacked into Klawf, but not getting attacked into by Terapagos. So in the Klawf deck, so you have that going for you that they have to attack into you with Terapagos. They cannot attack into you with Klawf and take it back out.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I think the Togekiss does give you like a lot of possibilities at winning games that you probably wouldn't have won in the past. I do think that a lot of the way that the lists are built are a little bit like exploitable, because it's like pretty difficult for them to gust if they're not like behind on the prize trade. So if you can like set up a board or just be like even trading with them and then like find a way to take the prize lead, even like even if they have Togekiss for the most part, like it's really difficult for them to find the, even though like they draw probably more cards than any other deck, it still can be difficult for them to find the boss, because usually it is just like the one of. You can kind of exploit them like that, and then like you kind of force them to go for Togekiss flips, which although like they a lot of time will matter, um, it's definitely better most of the time to force them to go for like 50-50s than have more consistent lines.
Yeah, one of the good things about the Togekiss is that it basically gives you a chance to win games where, like, if the prizes are tied like 2-2, or even if like Gholdengo has 2 prizes left and let's say Zard has 3, it still gives you a chance to win if they go with like a 1 prize board with a like a Radzard attacking. So I think that's really good now. You can obviously swing the prize trades in your favor. But like once again, you have to flip coins, man. It's so annoying, you know. I know we were talking earlier, like if like Lugia, like just don't flip coins. If
Okay,
you
now
want to
hold
play,
on. I will. So, as a coin flip hater, I will say, Togekiss's coin flip doesn't cost you anything,
Sure.
whereas Lugia's coin flip costs you whether you're playing the game or not. So, I'll,
true.
I'm not out here to co-sign coin flips. I never will. However, Togekiss, as far as coin flip goes, I see it as it's just a dude that sits on your bench. Sometimes it's like a tag team wrestler. Sometimes Togekiss tags in, and sometimes he's sitting on the bench doing nothing. So
Mhm.
it depends
That's fair,
on
yeah.
the situation.
Yeah, the Togekiss is a really strong addition. I definitely like the 102 line. I've seen a couple people do that for it. Definitely makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it's much scarier now. It's pretty real. So one deck I want to talk about next is one that popped up pretty strongly at Pagoda, at least in like multiple forms, I guess. But some background lore is that during one of the podcasts we were recording before Baltimore, I don't remember if this was just like right after Worlds or right before Baltimore. I don't remember the timing of it, but while we were not recording, Michael was saying that they were testing Ancient Box a lot of the time, and they felt like the deck was pretty strong. Everyone was really hyped on Ancient Box right after Worlds in general, because they were like, "Oh, the Speech Drago, yay!" But obviously, you didn't end up playing it to the next event. But now it's kind of seeing a resurgence very recently. What are your thoughts on the deck right now, Michael?
I think the deck still has a lot of the same issues that we thought it had for Baltimore. I think also, I guess Miraidon kind of takes your Bolt matchup, but the main reason to play the deck before was just because it had such a favored Raging Bolt matchup when most decks didn't have a great Bolt matchup at the time, besides Zard. But I think the fact that like Zard has Briar now, other decks can play Briar. Um, I just don't think the raw strength of the deck is like enough to keep up with like the way the format has changed. And we didn't think it was like that well placed either way for Baltimore, especially with most Regidragos playing Jamming Tower. And I think some of them will switch to Vacuum, and I guess some of them have Sinnoh, but I think most of them will still play it. So taking what I think is an unfavored Drago and an unfavored Zard is just like not a very appealing thing about the deck. I don't think the turbo decks that you kind of capitalize off, I don't think they're popular enough to really warrant playing Ancient Box.
Yeah, I was also testing Ancient Box like with my group before Baltimore. Uh, I played it to a League Cup. That was the only event I played it to, and I just noticed that like the deck, it drew worse than it should have. Like obviously you have the 4 Sadas, the 4 Explorers, but like 4 Pokestops. But I just could not draw anything to save my life, man. And then you pair that with a horrible Zard matchup. That Zard matchup is like terrible. And I guess that's like one of the reasons that we were kind of considering it before Baltimore is because Zard was like kind of irrelevant. But in this meta where Zard is, I think it might be the second most played deck. I don't think you should play Ancient Box at all.
Not a fan. New Koraidon's cool. It probably saves your Miraidon matchup, which probably before was a little bit weird with hands. So now you have that, but I don't know if that is warranting to play the deck.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of not a lot of onboard draw, only having Ninja. Not a fan. Not a fan of having the Fez in the deck. I'm just not a fan of the deck at all. I've never been an Ancient Box enjoyer. So yeah, not good.
On the flip side of that is Turbo Roaring Moon, which has also seen a resurgence. One got top 4 at Pagoda, and then it's just been getting a lot of top 16s and top 32s at some of the other regionals too.
So for those who want to play something like Raging Bolt or Miraidon but don't want to lose to control, you should be playing Roaring Moon. That is the only reason you should be playing Roaring Moon over a Raging Bolt or a Miraidon. I'd say that you probably have just as much of an amount of percentage points versus Drago as Bolt does. Like you should be the games that you're going to cheese Drago, you're going to cheese them, and the games that they jam Radzard twice or Iono you and you miss, those are going to be the ways that you lose anyways. So you don't lose any matchup percentage points there. But you do gain the insane advantage versus block and Pidgeot control, which is pretty nice considering both Bolt and Miraidon just get absolutely dumpstered by those. So if you're wanting to take an aggressive deck that doesn't fold to block or control, then you should play Roaring Moon. However, I don't think there's any other reason why you should be playing Roaring Moon over Raging Bolt other than just that, because Raging Bolt just has pretty much all the same matchups across the board. I don't think Roaring Moon has any extra matchup percentage points on Zard than Raging Bolt as far as.
Before Sacramento, I was a big believer in Miraidon. I told everyone that Miraidon was the best deck, and everyone should played it. No one listened to me and ended up winning the event. But I still think that Miraidon is the best turbo deck. I don't like it's not really like much for debate. You just have so many more options than you do with Raging Bolt and Roaring Moon. You have hands, you have Miraidon, you have Raikou. Like the deck is just overall better. And then you also have like a better Drago matchup. You have a bit worse Zard matchup.
Yeah,
But
I think
I still
Zard is
think
like the
that's
main
beatable.
reason to like switch away from
Yeah.
that, right?
For sure. Yeah, but I still think that the deck is definitely the best of the 3 turbo options.
Miraidon.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Turbo Roaring Moon lately because I played it a lot earlier in the year and I used to really like it. I love what the Koraidon adds to the deck. It's really really nice to clean up some random stuff. It's much more like you can just kind of swing repeatedly with single prizers now, which old versions of the deck couldn't do before. I actually didn't look at the Pagoda list until just now, but I actually really like what they got going on here. I need to test this later. But yeah, they play Secret Box with the 2 ancient boosters to just like ruin the Klawf game plan of like poisoning your stuff a lot and letting you actually use Fez more, which sounds pretty good. Because the Klawf matchup's kind of sketchy with the normal Roaring Moon list. But yeah, I think if you're going to play a turbo list, I personally like this the most of all of them. It just is very well balanced kind of matchup spread, and you kind of just turn 2 donk things a lot of the time, and it's pretty good. So, and I feel like compared to some of the other decks too, at least compared to like Raging Bolt, I feel like I just get turn 2 attack pretty often, at least more comfortably than I did with Raging Bolt before. So, BlockLax, Benny,
Dude.
talk about BlockLax.
All right. I think that block is decently positioned into this meta. I mean, I know some people call me the block expert. No flex there. But I wouldn't say that it's the best play. You take like a decent Drago matchup. You take a fine Zard matchup. I don't think it's like particularly great, especially now that pretty much every list that I see is running Cologne. I mean, some have started to cut
I don't
it.
think that's true.
Yeah, some
I
have
mean,
started to cut it.
Arnie's
But
list didn't play it, and I don't think the other finalists list played it, but I do
However,
think Cologne will be kind of popular.
he
I
had
think Cologne's
Thornton,
correct to play.
he had Thornton Turo 2 Duskulls though, so I think even that's enough to possibly win the game.
Yeah.
Cologne.
Like you add on all that, and then also Klawf is running Petulant now, which is I think Klawf's probably going to be a top 3 or 4 most played deck.
Oh,
I think so. I could see it, but it's matchups like it's into the top decks. They aren't as good as it once was, which is why I don't think it's. I'm not going to play it for this
Don't.
tournament at least. But there's still definitely merit to playing it. I think that Pidgeot control is way better into this meta. You just have like a lot more options into a lot of these decks. But yeah, like you have more options against Klawf. You can use the Ursaluna to eventually like wipe all 6 prizes. I mean, obviously it's not like the most reliable strat, but I think it's a lot better than Block right now, at least.
my comment on blocking control is Lugia has pretty much been absent, which is one of your worst matchups, so that's pretty cool. However, you gained a horrible matchup in Klawf, and like we had said, there are some people who are roaring mooners out there, so you have those. I will say that there are ways to beat Klawf and ways to beat Roaring Moon. They just involve playing Lost City in a bear. So I don't know if Block can actually do that and not open it enough. But I think something like Pidgeot Control could easily include the bear and the Lost City to be able to remove the Petulant EX, and then you can trap them from that point on. That being said, time constraints, difficulty to play the deck, the sheer amount of decks that already have a good time against you are there. Especially if you do run into random Lugia, a Klawf that runs hot, takes away your Pidgey or Rotom too quickly, stuff like that. I personally wouldn't play the deck. However, I would be lying if I said that it doesn't seem like it's good when you're losing like one of your worst. I mean, Lugia was just so terrible for you, and now it just isn't there. So there's definitely food for thought there. And I think there was like some type of attacking Pidgeot thing that got streamed at Stuttgart. It was like playing like Crystal and all that other stuff. I would not endorse playing something like that. I would definitely play more of the block Mimikyu, Black Curum, maybe. I'm not sure if that one is supposed to be in there or not. I've seen some people include it. There's like some internet kid. It's like All Out Blitzel or something. He plays like every online tournament, and this guy just smashes it. I mean, this dude just must only play Control on his computer all day long. But he has Curum in his list. So if that guy's got it, maybe you're supposed to have it.
Yeah.
Seems like
I would rather play Bouffalant.
Okay, yep. Could get down with Bouffalant too. It's just lost zoning their 2 fire energies. I could get down with a lot of versions of Pidgeot. I wouldn't play Block. If you were to force me to play one or the other, I would play Pidgeot. That would be the way that I would play.
Yeah, shout out All Out Blitzel. I hit him top 4 of the Indie Cup, and he said, "Oh, I listened to the podcast, so he might hear that you mentioning."
Awesome. Enjoy your cure.
Yeah, I think I would kind of agree with Benny. I think Block has pretty good matches, specifically the Rotomless version. I don't think there's like room to play. Not that there's not room. I don't think the Rotom version is like able to get the Rotom out of play fast enough and still be a functioning deck against most of the format. But I think the Rotomless version has like a lot of merit. But I am kind of with Benny that your matchups against like the top decks aren't quite as good as you would want them to be to like really justify playing somewhat of a matchup roulette that like that. I do think the absence of Lugia, like Hunter said, is really, really big for the deck because a lot of times if you'd play Block, your tournament would just be like your tournament run would just be ended if you hit like 1 or 2 too many Lugias. And I think with that, without the potential to like really hit multiple Lugias in a tournament, I think Block is probably better, but Klawf is also a bad matchup if you don't have an answer for it. So that kind of replaces that. And it's a little bit difficult to justify actually playing block for this tournament. But I do think it's better placed than it has been, probably.
All right. Really quickly, then we can talk about Lugia because we were talking about before we started recording, and Hunter said it might be the Metacall deck. Do you want to elaborate?
So I'll start by saying I'm not going to play this deck, so you're not going to get me on the gotcha moment. Who's worried about me preaching about a deck that I'm not going to play? I am not playing it. I will not play a flip deck. However, Klawf, one of Klawf's only bad matchups, percentage-wise, is Lugia, because you cannot knock out the Lugia with the Klawf on the turn 2, so they will most assuredly get up and get set up. You don't mind the Charizard matchup if you know what you're doing. There are plenty of Charizard players that will probably argue with me in the other way. If you're a Charizard player, you know what you're doing. You're just never candying until you're killing a Chops. So, but there are, there are merits to playing the matchup on both sides. So I don't hate your Charizard matchup. As I stated, block and control has done decently in day 2 for a majority of these regionals this year. The conversion rate for those decks are always good. So getting free wins against those. Regidrago is not playing Sinnoh. That's just a slam dunk dead matchup. Like if Regidrago does not have Sinnoh, you're not beating a Lugia that's setting up, albeit you have to flip coins and set up. So there's the trade-off there. But if you set up, it's literally a slam dunk. You cannot lose. You have to, I don't know what you would have to do to lose that matchup. You gave him the bad Miraidon matchup, but as Benny was saying, nobody, even after it winning, it hasn't picked up steam. It hasn't picked up Miraidon fanboys have not happened. So I don't think it's that horrible. So your worst 2 matchups are a 5 to 6% meta loss box and a 4 to 5% meta Miraidon. And then you're beating probably the biggest deck, which is Regidrago. So I definitely don't think that I don't think it would surprise me if someone does well. And I'll just throw a name out there that will probably for sure play the deck and do well. Kieran is from Canada. He's been playing the deck all year long. I don't even see a world where the guy doesn't play the deck. So I will just go ahead and throw a needle in the haystack right now and say that Kieran will probably do well and place well with the deck and play it. So I would not be surprised to see it.
All right. Well, I'll counter that with Raul will probably do well with Lugia the event.
I don't think he's gonna play it. But
Look, if we're just making random guesses, I mean,
you want to take a bet?
No,
Etchy?
absolutely not.
Okay.
I am not betting on a random person playing Lugia at this event.
Why not? What's wrong with a little bit of gambling?
I'm going to be doing that
dude,
all
Lugia's
9
a gamble
rounds, dude. It's all
itself.
good.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'll throw it out. If anybody wants to wager whether Kieran or Rahul will do better with Lugia, I will put money on Kieran doing better.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was going to say with Lugia, got top 8 at Pagoda. Raul got like top 16 and lost winning in 2 Thorns at Perth. I think the only real, other than what you said, is just the fear of random Pult Thorns and I guess regular Iron Thorns too. Just running into those sounds pretty scary. If you expect those decks to be at the same or like to grow in percentage at all, sounds bad. But otherwise, it's probably totally fine to play it for this tournament. Honestly. All right, I think we've procrastinated for as long as we could. We got to talk about the same 2 decks we always talk about: Regidrago and Zard. Benny earlier was saying that Michael loves talking about Regidrago. So, Michael, do you want to start with that?
I want to talk about Zard more.
Okay, if you want to talk about Zard, we can start with that. Sure.
Okay. I don't know. I'm a really big fan of Zard right now. I think the deck, like, besides your Drago matchup, almost all your matchups are like no worse than like 45-55. And I think like with if you can kind of outskill your opponents, I guess is like the easiest way to say it. Like if you think you're the better player, a lot of times like your win rate will be like really high into a lot of matchups with Zard. There's like so many things you can do. And I think it's probably the highest comeback potential deck right now because like it's not very easy for most decks to counter an established Zard board that is just going like stamp Pidgeot and have like attacking with the Zard, killing whatever you want with counter catcher. It's not very easy for most decks to respond to that. So I think Zard is like very well placed. The Drago matchup is definitely bad, and taking an unfavored matchup to a deck that most top players play is like almost a good enough reason to maybe not play the deck, but it's not like you just like lose. You have a lot of win cons. You can, especially if you go first, that matchup's not even that bad. So I think while the Drago matchup is bad, I think Zard's matchups across the board are like so good that I don't think it could ever be a bad play to this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Zard is Zard. It's always like solid. It's never like, I don't think it's gonna die before rotation happens. Even after rotation, I still think it'll be a very relevant deck. It's just so strong. Like, obviously your Drago matchup in this meta, like Michael said, it's not great, but your other matchups all like, very winnable. I think it's more of a high skill ceiling deck now than it ever has been. You have the Dusknors, the Briar, you have Thornton now. Hard deck to play, but if you're able to play it well, you'll definitely see success with it.
Big fan of Zard. So I don't know why it was criminally underplayed the last 3 months in both the Stellar Crown and this. It's not. I guess it's not underplayed in the Surging Sparks, but it was criminally.
We did get a double finals, yeah.
Yeah, we did. We did get a double finals, but it was criminally underplayed in the Stellar Crown format. I do think again, it's time to add Manaphy. I think you're psycho if you're not playing Manaphy. Just to lose to have it worse versus Drago, and also you already have a tough game against Lost Box. Even if they don't Greninja you, you're still in a tough spot depending on how they play the matchup. But I just think it's a solid deck. You beat all the turbo decks. You have a chance against Control, which if you go back to like EUIC and post, or EUIC last year and post that, like Block was one of your worst matchups. Now it's winnable. So that's a nice addition. So yeah, definitely big Zard fan. Won't play it, but I do think it's definitely just a solid deck. I take it back. I won't be playing Zard Pidgeot. However, a Zard deck is one of the decks I'm planning on.
A teaser.
Not Zard.
Lost Box Charizard. Let's bring it back.
No, that deck is terrible. never play that deck.
No thanks.
I was gonna say with Zard, yeah, I think it's probably one of the most like well-rounded picks, and that's kind of always the case with Zard. I think it's a very safe play if you're very good at the deck, and I do think it's interesting that it is pretty much like the only like high percentage deck that actually still plays Dusknoir now. So many other decks have just cut it, or just those decks aren't in favor anymore. And just having that option is just so strong, like all the time.
Can I throw this out just for something for us to talk? Why do you guys think there is no Terapagos? Because I don't see like a giant reason why not to play Terapagos, whether you're playing. I'm not really a fan of the Palkia Jet thing. I think it's an okay deck, but that wouldn't be how I would play it. But what is wrong with playing like Buffalon, Dusknoir, Pidgeot, Terapagos? I don't see like a real big reason why that's a horrible deck.
I don't think your Zard matchup is good at all.
Okay.
I've told people I think the Klawf matchup is unfair for Terapagos. They say that Terapagos should smoke Klawf. I think that if you go first and if you can go first and get that donk, like obviously game over there. And even then you're still hitting weakness into Terapagos going second, which is really good. So I think that matchup's favored. Some people don't. But and then like you have to take like a 50-50 Drago matchup, I guess. It can go like either way basically. So I guess all those reasons combined make Terapagos not that like keen to play. But it's still like not a terrible deck.
Yeah, I think you are unfavored to Klawf for sure. Like no matter what, even if they go full, even if you were to, if you're the other Terapagos, you're the Klawf player, they're the Terapagos player, and they present a turn one board, they can just take a knockout without even wasting an energy. So it's just, I couldn't see how that wouldn't be true. I do agree that your Zard matchup is for sure sketchier for like the not if you're doing like the non-Buffalon stuff or you're light on Dusknoir. I definitely can see Charizard being a problem. However, I think if you went back to something like Giovanni Sasso's build where you're playing a lot of Dusknoir, I think that version is probably fine against Charizard. However, it's less inconsistent.
I mean, I still think it's unfavored against Zard, though. I feel like they have like way more control. You have to like have a wide board. They can keep their board narrower, and you need like Dusknoir to hit math, whereas they don't really do it, and I think it's easier for them to kill Pidgeot, and if they can go like kill Pidgeot Stamp, that's like a really strong play. I think for the most part, the Terapagos deck is kind of just a worse Zard right now. I think they have like somewhat similar matchups. I do think Terapagos definitely has a better Drago matchup, but a lot of your other matchups, Zard is just like a little bit better into. I don't think Terapagos has a great Miraidon matchup if they can just go 2-2-2, which is a little bit hard to stop. If you can go first and get down boofs, it's pretty difficult for them to deal with that, but
Then
for
you're
the most part, I think
if you get down what you were saying, if you get down the boost, then your board like sucks if you have to do that turn one, right? Because you're
yeah, exactly.
2/3 of your Rotom is going to 2 boosts. That's
exactly, yeah. So, and if that's like your best chance at winning the matchup, like you're probably not having a super strong turn 2, and it's also difficult to justify. Not difficult to justify, but your Pidgeot will probably die pretty quick if you put it in play versus that matchup. So I think you struggle more into some of the turbo matchups, whereas Zard is very good into those, and I think just across the board has slightly better matchups and will also have a better Zard matchup because I think Terapagos is relatively unfavored into Zard.
Yeah, I agree that still think it's unfavored. I was just saying I don't like the light Dusknoir list. I don't think have a chance against Dusknoir. Or
True,
against,
yeah. I would agree.
you have to have heavy Dusknoir to like go first, bench a bunch of Dusks plus Owls, and then kind of just pop their whole board, right? Pop multiple Pokemon and attack Terapagos. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. Like Lugia, it makes sense why it's kind of fallen off, like having Lost Box and Rhydon, but Terapagos, it just doesn't feel like there's like an overwhelming deck that pushes it out, except maybe like Lost Box becoming popular. That's not a great matchup either. So I just couldn't think of too many reasons why Terapagos isn't a little more popular, but it makes sense with Charizard getting first and second, and then you're unfavored to Charizard. So that tracks to me.
Yeah. Last deck then to talk about is Regidrago, which, along with Zard, will probably those two will still probably be in the top 3 most played this weekend. We'll talk about meta predictions in a bit, but since you passed the blame to Michael and then Michael stole Zard back, do you want to talk about Regidrago, Benny?
Sure. I mean, Drago's Drago. We've seen it have success for the past like 3 formats, maybe even 4. It's never gonna go away. I thought it was gonna go away when Stellar Crown released. Obviously, it didn't. You saw Miloslav and Brent get finals at LAIC. Brent got top 8 at Sacramento, which is a new format with I'm pretty sure the same list. You saw people starting to include the egg now.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good deck. One reason I won't play it is because I can't draw anything with that deck. I've played it on live. I can't draw with it, but I mean, it's really solid. If you want to have a deep tournament run, just play Drago. Honestly, that's what I would say.
Yeah. I think it's probably like the most rewarding deck if you like know how to play it very well. Like even your bad matchups are, if you learn like the lines, like even your bad matchups are usually not like worse than a 40-60, which means that you're winning a pretty decent amount of the time. I do think the deck has like some consistency issues, but not especially more than a lot of other decks. And just like playing a little bit slower, using Klawf a little more is usually can kind of pair over those. The one thing I'll say is that in the past, if you knew the Drago matchup, if you knew the mirror lines a little bit better, you definitely had a bigger advantage. But I think like by now, at least in day 2, the vast majority of Drago players are very well aware of Clefo lines, playing around the double Kyurem, and just like how to structure their board. So I don't think there's quite as much. There's not quite as much advantage to be gained in the mirror by knowing the mirror better, but I think for the most part, all your matchups are still like very good to at least solid or winnable, and it's pretty difficult to justify not playing Drago. If at least like if you have like a relatively decent amount of games with the deck.
Right.
Deck solid, practice the mirror, go second. I enjoy going second just to get a better board and not use Squawk, play around the double Kyurem. There's not really too much advice that I have. I'm probably not going to play the deck, but if you want to play the deck, just practice the mirror. Hope the Klawf players draw worse than you because it's they draw hot, you're just losing for sure.
I mean, I think there's like a lot of comeback potential. I don't think it's like unreasonable to come back down like 5 prizes in that matchup. Like they can't really do a lot if you Iono to 1. I do think Gudra is pretty important for that in terms of like actually being able to have like a survivable board once they're so far ahead. But I think with Gudra and I think like 3 Iono is really good in Drago. So being able to like Iono them multiple times and kind of like make I don't think it's like unreasonable to make a pretty solid comeback in that matchup. Because you almost always will have to. They're always going to have a little bit more aggression than you for the most part. So you have to be able to come back in that matchup, and I think it's pretty reasonable too.
All right. We'll talk about a few more decks in the bonus episode of the podcast. But for now, we'll do meta predictions to finish out the episode. This is really hard. There's like too many decks. I don't know. Who wants to start?
Nothing over 17%.
For sure,
Klawf, Klawf 5 to 7. Drago 12 to 15. Bolt 8 to 10. Zard 8 to 12. Everything else is sub 10%. There's not, like I said earlier, there's not really a meta call besides Lugia, so don't try to make a meta call for this tournament. Play what you know.
Yeah, this meta is.
Go ahead.
No, go, Michael.
I would even elaborate. I think no deck over 15%.
Sure, yeah.
I do think Drago will be somewhere between like 12 to 14, and that's gonna be the most played deck. I think Zard's probably the number 2, around like 10 to 11, maybe even lower. And then I would probably have. It's like hard to call, but maybe Klawf at 3 if you combine like both variants, because I think there's still some people that are gonna play like the non-Terapagos variant. So if you combine both of those, I could see it being like 8 or maybe even 9% around that area. I think the deck will be like very popular, which maybe even top 3 popular.
Wow, more than Bolt. I'm pretty much gonna. I'll put it out there that if you look at all the percentages, even from Stellar Crown to now, which there hasn't been that many deck changes, Zard, Bolt, and Regidrago are always the top 3. I just don't see that changing, regardless.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think Bolt will be top 4
maybe
for sure.
To like 8%, but if Klawf was at 10%, like that's just, I don't know, that's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I guess I did say like I could see Klawf being 3rd, but I guess Bolt probably staying at the 3 makes a little bit more sense.
Maybe this will be the event where people wake up and stop playing Bolt.
That would
like
be
10
insane.
events of it being overplayed.
People
one did get top 8 at like one of the last couple of regionals. So sure.
Oh,
yeah, there was one at Pagoda that got top 8. So that's never mind. It'll be number 2 played again. So that's all they need to keep going. Yeah, I'll say what's that deck? Regidrago. That one will be number 1. And then I'm going to say Bolt number 2. I'm going to say Zard number 3. Because every time I'm like, oh, Zard's a good call for this event. And then way less people play it than I expect. So I'm just going to put it at 3 and assume there'll be more Bolt. And then, yeah, after that, it's going to be a lot of like 5 to 7%. If I had to guess, I would say maybe like Klawf 4, Gholdengo 5. I could see a lot of Gholdengo soldiers out there. But
you guys are believers in the Gholdengo. Dude.
For real, yeah. That is my main prediction. I really don't know what to think about Lost Box percentage wise, because I still think Drago will be like played heavily enough, but I don't know. I'll say let's say like Lost Box 5%. That's my other prediction, and that's it for me.
That seems fair.
Yeah,
that seems fair.
I'm going to say Zard number 1, Drago 2, Bolt 3, Klawf 4, and Gholdengo 5.
All right. I think that's it then for this episode of the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube. If you'll be at Toronto Regionals, feel free to say hi to any of us, and also good luck as well. Any shout outs from Michael?
shout out just my Twitter. Should be linked in the description, and shout out DDG. Enjoy the podcast.
Benny.
As you know, the shoutouts are very sacred to me. So for starters, I don't think I've announced this yet on the podcast. I started a Metafy, so shout out to my Metafy. We'll go shout out to Caleb Rogerson this one.
Ooh.
Shout out DDG, and shout out to my stuffed cat that I've had since I was born.
All right. Hunter, any website you want to shout out?
Yeah, shout out Cutter Tap. You can find my articles there. Not on Metafy, not on anything else. I'm going to be cold. I'm from Florida, so I'm not excited. So if you got any extra jackets, bring them, and good luck.
Awesome. For me, I'm just going to shout out my non-TCG related YouTube, youtube.com/etch, just without the Y. If you could subscribe to that, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I also want to shout out Michael's Messy Room. So that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.